Welcome. Today I am here with my dear friend, Dr. Khanita Suvarnasuddhi. It did take me a lot of warm up to pronounce that correctly. And Dr. Khanita is an acupuncturist, chiropractor, and Chinese medicine herbalist. Super impressive because she got all three of those degrees at the same time, which is absolutely ludicrous trying to do it was two master's degrees and a doctoral degree in
Yes,
one
yes.
go. I honestly cannot imagine anybody else going through that, and yet I could not imagine Khanita not going through that. So, uh,
It's good
blended with
times.
her healing background, Khanita has also done different styles of martial arts over the past 5 years, and started in combat sports in boxing at 12. And Khanita practices currently in Clarksburg, Maryland, and has done so since 2017. And her focus in the clinic is the blending of Eastern and Western treatments, especially Chinese medicine, and how it can help in today's modern stresses. And Khanita really tries to help people live their best lives using holistic methods. So, welcome, Dr. Khanita.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here during this time. It's
Oh,
been
it's an
great catching up.
absolute pleasure. And I feel like you are going to be a great resource for a lot of people. If I mean, not that you aren't already in Maryland, but hopefully around Ottawa and wherever else people are listening
Yes,
too.
I would love
Because,
to.
well, and you just have such a broad knowledge because you've got sort of, I know there was some medical, like a more traditional Western medical background for you at one point, and then
hmm
rolling into chiropractic and sort of the more
hmm
like Western style of holistic treatments, and all
hmm
your Eastern holistic treatments. I feel like there's, quite honestly, there's like nothing you don't know at this point.
Oh, there's a lot I don't know still. But yeah, I started with, I think, ever since I was young, I kind of knew I wanted to be some sort of doctor. I always like was very drawn to it, and I was on the pre-med route for a long time, in college, and really into those classes until I actually went to Thailand with my mother for, I think it was 2011, I think. Yeah. We went for 2 months, and I actually got to shadow a Chinese medicine doctor there. And he came from China and practiced in Thailand. And he's treating all sorts of stuff. I saw some crazy stuff out there too. My first treatment was actually in Thailand, not in the States, funny enough.
Oh, interesting.
And at the time he even knew, because I had previous injuries from I think you're aware of, like, my shoulders, like, really, I dislocated my left shoulder a lot. And it was insane because I didn't tell the doctor this, but he could tell it was like kind of funky. So he did some treatment on that, and prior to that, I did see a chiropractor as well who helped me a lot during the rehab process. So that definitely is what kind of sparked my interest to try to learn both. Um, and at the time, at the school, I was interested in herbal medicine, but I was like, oh, it's too much work. And the counselor at the time was like, oh, we don't want you to die. And one of the teachers there, I think she's Kathy Taramina, is a dean in the Seattle school right now, but she basically convinced me to do herbs, and I blame her for my my many, like, late nights of doing all three programs at once. So, but I got through it somehow.
I can only imagine there were some late night. Well, I know there were some late nights, but
Yeah, we went to school together, so you see me go crazy.
exactly. Well, and it was an interesting situation being at that school because everybody went crazy. It was just sort of like what level of crazy
Yes,
you kind of reached
exactly.
the joys of it all. Um, and then, so right now, obviously being like a little bit of a different time, we've got the shutdown going on. And I know we had
hmm
talked last week, and similar to where we were in Ontario and Maryland, most
Yeah.
things are shut down. Things are
Yes.
obviously not operating as any sort of normal right now. Um, and I know that you had said that, at least to some extent, you were still trying to help people. It didn't look like it used to by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
But what have been sort of the differences in what people are reaching out for help with since the shutdown? So give or take mid March, compared to
Mm.
what practice had looked like before that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, same with me and you, our medicine is very like physical in a way, like with the physical touch, like figuring out what's wrong with the body that way. So that has changed dramatically in trying to do everything virtually. And in terms of like what people are asking for now, I think the social distancing, the isolation has really gotten to people. So it's more about like the focusing, the mindset, the kind of like more. Some people are doing really well with it in terms of not having to go out as much, right? Some social anxiety, but others aren't doing so well with not being able to see people. So wanting to like talk more versus, oh, I have something wrong with me. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, it's been interesting for me because I'm like kind of right in the middle between being introverted and extroverted,
Yes.
and working, trying to build a practice and trying to do things like podcasts and
Hmm.
everything you have to do as sort of the entrepreneurial side of trying to get a clinic off the ground is, it's very extroverted. You've got to be in touch
Yes.
with people all the time.
Hmm.
And so up to the start of the shutdown, I'd always thought like, oh, geez, I could use some more introverted time. And now I'm looking, saying like, oh, this wasn't what I wanted. This is
Yeah.
far, far too much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think now focusing on like I think the patients are appreciating more of the videos I'm making. So I try to really put stuff out there for even still pain management. That was like the main thing I was treating in my clinic is a lot of pain management, right? And movement patterns. So I'm trying to stay in contact with them in that way, like posting more. I think you've seen it, posting more videos,
Yep,
just trying to have encouragement to kind of you're still there for them in a way, even though you're not like physically there. So it's definitely been like kind of a weird turn of events, but we all have to adapt to it in a way, in our own way.
absolutely. And with that, how have you yourself been adapting to things?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely ups and downs. We're all not immune to the social isolation and going crazy. So I think the key thing for me when I did this was like, okay, I got to keep some schedule, even though as flexible as it is. It's like, okay, you can't s- stay up too late and wake up so late too, or you have bad habits of doing
Yep,
whatever at night. So that's been a key thing, and having I think it helps right with the mind to have some sort of project to do, whether it be like related to your business or something that you always wanted to learn. I know some of my friends have tried like wanting to learn languages, so they've delved into that. So I adapted to kind of create these projects for myself so that I keep busy, so I'm not just watching Netflix all day or Criminal Minds, which is what I'm into. Uh, that has been key. And then even now, I'm kind of like you in the same boat. Like I feel like I'm naturally introverted, and but at the same time, I've learned to be more extroverted as well, especially with like being in my own practice. I had to learn how to interact with people. But as a kid in like middle school, I was like so introverted. Like I didn't really talk to anyone. So I've had to like go back into some of my more introverted activities, I guess. But yeah, there's definitely a balance with that, like journaling, writing more. I've been getting more into writing as well, content for the business, but also just for my own mental mental sake as well.
absolutely. Yeah, I personally found journaling really helpful
Hmm.
over the past little while. One of the previous guys I'd interviewed for the podcast is really, really big in journaling. And actually, I'm going through a course that he's put out. And
Oh, no way. That's cool. Yeah.
really, really neat course.
You have to
Of
let me know
course,
about that.
I'll I'll send it over. I'll link it in the show notes too. It's called The
Okay.
Trials. And the
Mm,
guy, the last guy on the podcast was Rick Alexander. But one of the challenges is just to like sit down for what feels like a very prolonged period of time.
yeah.
Because when I
Yeah.
journal, it usually had been like, I'll sit down and quickly fire off whatever's on my mind, just sort of that like flow of consciousness style. But it was just like as soon as whatever was on my mind at that moment was out of my mind, I was gone. I was off to something else. And
Mm,
so the challenge had been to sit for like
yeah.
50 minutes, an hour, and like just kind of wait for things, but to have blocked that off and see. And it was really interesting because a lot more comes out than you would just get by scratching off whatever's on the surface. And
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, the journaling was always something I also struggled with. I was the same, like sitting or you don't have time. But I read this book. It's called Emotional Agility, and I forget the author, but I've watched her TED Talk, and she does say like journaling, writing out like even past traumas too really helps you kind of reflect and think of ways to solve the problem too. That's why I was kind of like, oh, this is a good way to kind of put my ideas out. Um, but recently, I think you're familiar with Tim Ferriss, and I read his Tools for Titans book, and he has this thing called the morning pages, and it's a very short, so it's like 5-10 minutes of just like a couple questions that you answer. That's part of journaling that he does too. That I just started. So it's just like, what are you like 3 things you're grateful for? But it can be he talks about like um being grateful for like a old relationship or like a friendship that you highly value, or something that you saw, something you experienced, something that you witnessed, and like something small as well. And then daily affirmations, and another question would be like, what would make today awesome? So like 3 things, something like that. And then you write again at night for like 5 minutes, and it would just be like 3 things that went really well today, 3 things that could make it better. So trying that out too.
all good habits. And yeah, like something that's interesting is there doesn't seem to be a wrong way to do it. You
Yeah.
can either like answer those questions. I've had a couple people tell me that their pre-bed ritual, instead of doing like a brain dump so they can sleep, it's more of like I'm gonna write myself a list of things that I absolutely need to get done tomorrow, and that's gonna be sort of how to do it, or it's the questions, or there's every possible way
Mm,
to do it, and they all
mm-hmm.
seem to help, or at least
Yes.
everything might help somebody, and it's just finding the right way
Yeah.
for you, maybe.
You ever heard like the brain dumping at night too? Or I also use, in terms of like task management, I try to use like a Todoist to help with that too.
Yeah, yeah, the to-do lists are pretty key. There's a couple I've been using. It was called Wunderlist up till this
Oh
point,
yeah, yeah.
and
I
then
heard of
Microsoft
Wunderlist
bought it
too.
out. But it's like a shared to-do list.
Yeah.
So not something you can write on paper so much. It's like a phone or a computer thing, but really, really helpful if it's like a couple people working on something to keep
Mm-hmm.
track of everything, or like for like just even a shared grocery list or something. It's really nice,
Yeah.
but you don't want to be
Yeah, I
on it
heard of
too late
Wunderlist.
because then
Yeah.
you've got all the blue light coming into your eyes right before bed.
Yeah. You need the glasses, that's why. Because sometimes I will brain dump onto my to-do list. I'm like, oh, I need to do this, but you like forget about it.
Yeah.
So my thing is called Todoist, and but you can create projects on there, which I really like as well.
Oh, neat. Well, I might have to check that one out. Always helpful to just like play around and see what's out there.
Yeah, I'll send you that too, because I like it because it gives dates, it gives like priority tasks, and then you can tag them as different projects that you're doing, and yeah, it's really helpful. I really like it.
Actually, not one I think I've asked a lot of people, but are there any other tools like that that you've found really helpful, especially like over the past month and a bit?
Oh my God, there's so many that I've tried. Because I like Google Task at first, but then some of it's okay. So actually, Todoist, you can sync with Google Calendar, which is really cool. So it will
Oh,
show up
perfect.
on there. It also has like um, kind of like upcoming. So the only actually that's a new feature, so that you can see upcoming in the week. So seeing
Okay,
everything laid out. I personally use that mainly, sort of Google Calendar, but then I have like an actual planner that I write in, because that helps me too, like plan out the day,
of
and I
course.
can see like the whole week and then the month as well.
Yeah, I need to organize myself a little better, and that way I've got just like sticky notes everywhere. It's like a
Yeah,
new sticky note for each day, and it could be more organized, I think. There's like
it's all like a
chaos
process.
in organization,
I
but
know. Mine is still like that too. It's hard.
and yeah, eventually we'll all figure it out. But
Yeah,
or maybe we
yeah.
don't. Who knows?
That's
There's
the
so
main
much to
thing I
figure out.
use. Yeah.
And then what else are you implementing from, especially from your background, the mix of Eastern and Western medicine? What are you implementing into your own days?
So in terms of like, oh well, to answer that question, I personally, because of my martial arts background, I started doing like the qigong when I started acupuncture school, so like 4 or 5 years ago. Um, and for those of you not like aware of like qigong, it's similar to tai chi, but it's not really like a martial arts. It's more like specific forms that focuses on like the physiological body to help, partially with like rehab. Like it can be used for rehab, but it's also helps for like the what do you call it? The physiological functions of the organs as well, and improving that, even though it seems like it doesn't, but it works on a much deeper level of internal awareness. Um, so that's something that when I learned about it in acupuncture school, we actually started with Tai Chi, and I loved it so much that I was like, where can I get more of this? And that's kind of how I got into the Hanga form. It's a Southern martial arts in Geneva, New York, and that has been very implemental into my daily routine for sure. That helps with like the groundedness, the mindfulness, and also keeping my body moving and healthy.
Yeah, well, movement is absolutely huge, and it's something that, especially for most people kind of trapped in their house at this point,
Yes,
feels a lot harder to do. Are there any, like, is this something you can go on YouTube and kind of follow along to if you're not familiar with
yes.
it?
Yeah, I actually have a YouTube channel that now I've been updating with all the qigong stuff, so people can go on there and learn. I started with what's called the five elements qigong, so it's good for any like tension in the body, and it also improves like the functions of the organs, and it helps like helps with the flow of, I call it chi, but we'll call it energy for now. And the blood vessels and all that stuff, improves that function of making sure everything flows smoothly. So that's a really easy one to start with, and it's one I recommend people do if they've never done qigong before.
Well, perfect. Actually, you'll have to send me the link. I'll put it in the show notes, but I'll also follow along.
Yeah.
I've been taking the opportunity to try and do like a different like class or movement. I want to say class because I want to feel like I'm out doing a class, but following along with YouTube videos, be it like a
Hmm.
yoga class or like a P90X thing, or we can add
Yeah.
some qigong in. Some point I'm going to do like painting, but a little less physical, more for
Hmm.
the mental emotional side.
Oh, painting is so, I feel like it's so much work. You have to get everything set up. I probably do more like sketching.
Yeah, just something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Got a good spot to just lay some newspaper down, and that'll be
I
most of my
know.
setup.
To be outside, yeah. I so like that's been, I think that there's other qigong videos I think out there, but um the ones I've learned are actually from Tom Bizio, who he's a pretty awesome human being, and just, he's a martial artist as well, but practiced Chinese medicine. So I learned most of my stuff from his students because we were lucky one of his students was actually our teacher. And so I learned from him. So all those things that he taught are like very helpful for the body.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so
For
I'll definitely get
sure.
that posted, and like I said, I'll probably try and add in at least a weekly, if not every other day.
Yeah. I kind of teach it piece by piece and then you put it all together. The key is always to go slower than you think. And it seems like because I know like we're young and we want to like do everything much faster, but in this case, slower is better.
Yeah, well, and it's a really interesting mindset that I've found myself, and I kind of assume I'm not alone in it, is even though in a lot of ways I've got all day to do something, I'm
Hmm.
still trying to like I have to really focus on being present, or otherwise I'm just trying to get through something as quick as I
Yes.
can so that I can tick the next thing off. It's almost just like I'm looking for some way to be productive, and the more things I
Yeah.
can tick off, the more productive I feel. Whereas, yeah, like something like this will really, really force me.
Hmm.
Yeah, same with like some of the yoga and whatnot, but to slow it down, be in the moment, focus
Hmm.
on taking time and not worrying
Hmm.
about just trying to tick everything off. So for anybody who's
Yeah.
in that situation with me, this could be really good.
Yeah, I think that the thing we try to avoid the most, right, is the thing we need. Because the more things we schedule, we put on a schedule is actually an indication of like the time we need more to like meditate and ground and just like slow down a bit because we just want to check things off the list. But it doesn't really mean that we're being that productive, right?
No, absolutely.
Not
And
necessarily.
at one point there was a lot of like having to go back and like redo what I'd sort of done because I'd got it done to
Hmm.
do it and not to do it. Sort
Yeah.
of. Yeah, I'd finished it to check it off as opposed to like actually properly do it.
Hmm.
It was more to make myself feel like, oh yeah, I've done something.
Yeah, I know. I know how that feels.
But well, and I think that's like another really interesting piece is just like that, especially for those of us who have been fortunate enough to find something that like is give or take truly my calling.
Yes.
And I know you're
Hmm.
in the same boat. There's a huge disconnect from what normally my purpose is right now. And so it's like almost a scramble
Mm-hmm.
to be like, I need to find that purpose, and
Hmm.
maybe my purpose can be productivity
Yes.
in a blind form.
Yeah, I think once we ask ourselves that question, sometimes it's like that's when like the journaling really does help and it just starts to sort out what you're feeling and your reflections. So I think that's where like all that stuff comes in too, but not to hold it in your head for so long when you when you like are trying to find your purpose because I'm sure you're not the only one, and I was the same way where you're just like, what am I doing?
Absolutely. Well, there's something I wanted to go back just about a minute to, but something you had said, and I know I've heard it from you before,
Yeah.
and it was that sometimes what we most need for either our body or our mind are the things we try to avoid.
Yeah.
In terms of like this time for you, I know I've kind of
Mm.
mentioned sometimes I just need to like be able to sit with myself, and I'm trying to avoid that lack of purpose, or trying to deal with what that can be when I have lost the one I'd found.
Yeah.
Um, What are some ways that you've found to sit with it? I know you've mentioned journaling and meditation, but are there good ways that you've been dealing with trying to not avoid the things that you really need to deal with?
Mm, this is a good question because I think, I struggle with this too, where I'm like, I really should do this, but you do everything in your power, right? Like putting things on your to-do list to avoid it. So other than I think the slowing down, the meditation is one of them, and I feel like I want to meditate even more or meditate longer would be good because I still do mainly 5-10 minutes. The qigong is actually super helpful for that because sometimes I like want to just get through it, but at the same time, it's like, oh, let me actually just focus in on my body. It kind of forces you to, and really try to do that with minimal distractions. Because if you have like TV on or like people around you, it doesn't really, you know, but for a good like session.
Yeah, it doesn't hit the same. And actually,
Yes.
something that had been really interesting I'd found um, was like when you talk about meditation, I think
Mm.
I, along with a lot of people, always picture it as like somebody sitting cross-legged on the floor on a pillow or levitating or
Hmm.
however that looks. Um, and at one point, somebody had talked me through this concept of like a moving meditation
Yeah. Hmm.
and sort of that concept of and it sounds like qigong would fit really well into
Yes.
that, where
Hmm.
the like almost the movements themselves are meditative, and you're using the movements to try and like clear the mind
Yes.
and
Hmm.
generally when you're starting meditating, especially whatever's kind of sitting that's really pressing there comes to the top when you try and clear your
Hmm.
mind, so then you are sort of forced to deal with it or
Hmm.
get really uncomfortable and stuff. But
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Even with what I tell people with qigong, you're gonna feel uncomfortable in places where you were got injured or you feel stuck or like like people always say like I always get tight in this area, right? When you
yep.
deal with pain. So it's kind of like that's their block. And so the qigong not only forces you to kind of look at it, but you're like, okay, it's your body has this ability to kind of figure out how to like heal itself too. So you're like, okay, if I move slower with it, you're like, okay, I'm feeling everything in this unwind and open up. So that's the beauty of it too. Um, and there is like standing qigong, which is super useful, and you think it's like really easy, but it's like one of the hardest things ever because you're in a posture and you're like, okay, I can do this, and then but internally your energy is still moving, right? Your heart's still beating, everything's still moving, but you're still, and that's also like a whole different ball game because I remember our teacher at acupuncture school for a final exam, he like set a timer. He didn't tell us how long. And he was like, you're gonna stand here. And we're like, oh my God. And we were like shaking. But then afterwards you feel really good, like because you kind of start to unblock everything that's been stuck or and your body and your mind is like forced to kind of like focus on those things other than like all the other extraneous details of your life. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, it feels like something I'm going to need because despite like a pretty decent mobility routine and all the
Yeah.
knowledge that should go behind that, my body still feels kind of stuck. So until I can get
Mm-hmm.
somebody else to get their hands on me, I will
I know,
definitely
right?
be trying this.
Kairos need Kairos too.
Oh, absolutely. It is definitely one of the things I'm most excited for when I am able to go
Yeah,
do it again.
yeah, yeah. I miss like school was nice because we just all treated each other all the time.
Yeah. I will say for those listening that it is great towards the end, but when you're at the beginning and everybody's learning what's going on,
Yeah, yep,
there's an old joke that it takes a minimum of a year to physically recover from chiropractic school,
pretty
and
much.
as it turns out, it was actually pretty accurate.
Yeah, I feel like mine took like a year and a half, but I don't know. It's the same thing with acupuncture. Like we were so bad at sticking each other in the beginning that you're like somewhat traumatized before you can actually go back to getting a needle again. And then at
Absolutely.
the end, we're like, oh, we're pretty good now. But before it was just
Yeah,
like
there's a
so
skill that
bad.
goes with it, and it
Yeah.
takes like any other skill some time to
Yeah.
develop.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
actually kind of leads us back into what I've been using as the rapid fire questions at the end of the
Mm.
podcast. So,
Mhm.
first one being, what is the thing you are most looking forward to when quarantine comes to an end?
I honestly can't wait to just like eat out with my friends again. I mean, that was a huge for me, like that's how I spent time with my friends. It was like our favorite thing to do. And we're like, let's go get Korean barbecue after this.
Yeah, Korean barbecue sounds great right now. I mean, like
Yeah,
everything sounds great right now. I'm not a
I know,
bad cook
right?
by any stretch, but I've also been
I'm
doing a
tired of
lot
my
of,
food at the house.
yeah, I've been doing a lot of like just bulk meal prep to avoid eating
Mm,
far too much because, like if you've got your week's worth of rice and sweet potato and beef or
mhm,
chicken or whatever cooked up, then
mhm,
you're less likely to then go and turn and try and create a whole lot. And
mhm.
I've so far avoided putting on any quarantine weight, but
That's good.
I know if if Korean barbecue were an option every day, then that might be a
Yeah.
very different story.
Well, they do most of the time have a bunch of vegetables, so it's not all bad. It's
Yeah,
like
well,
keto-esque.
of course, yeah.
Keto-esque.
The other question goes along with that though. What has been your favorite quarantine snack so far?
Oh yeah, the quarantine snack. Oh my gosh. What have I been eating? I've been eating like more like chips and guac or chips and salsa.
It's not bad. The guac and the
Yeah,
salsa are obviously
yeah.
good, and depending on the chips. I've heard a
Mhm.
lot worse for quarantine snacks.
Yeah, not as bad. So some fats in there.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on with me today, Kanita. It's been great catching up with you.
Yes. It was great to chat with you. I think I realized I talk more about like the eastern side, but
Hey, I've had enough Western on here that I think the Eastern side was kind of the more fresh
yeah,
piece, anyways. So that's awesome.
yeah, it's all good. I mean, there's ways that like being in practice is how I kind of combine both, but that can be another conversation. But this was fun to talk about the eastern side.
Absolutely. Yeah, and at some point we'll get you back and talk about the blending and
Yes.
practice in real life. But
Yeah.
until real life comes back, this is a good one.
We'll just deal with this.
Exactly. All right. Thank you again.
No problem. Thanks, Pink. It's good to see you.